In the days when Nyame the sky god still walked among mortals, when the baobab trees could speak and the rivers sang lullabies to sleeping villages, there lived a weaver bird named Kwaku, whose voice could make the ancestors weep with joy. His song so beautiful that even Anansi the trickster spider would pause in his web spinning to listen, and the wind would carry Kwaku's melodies across 7 kingdoms. But this is not a story about songs alone. This is a story about love that defied the gods, sacrifice that shook the heavens, and how one small bird's courage saved all the music in the world. Kwaku lived in the village of Nkosuo, where the red earth met the endless savanna and acacia trees stretched their arms toward the setting sun. And unlike other weaver birds who built their nests with nimble beaks and patient threading, Kwaku's gift was his voice. When he sang, his throat glowed like molten gold, and the very air around him shimmered with threads of light. The village children would gather beneath his tree each evening, their eyes wide with wonder as Kwaku wove stories into song. Tales of brave hunters who outwitted leopards, wise grandmothers who could speak to the moon, and ancient kings whose hearts were pure as river stones. His melodies healing the sick, comforting the grieving, and making the hardest heart remember what it meant to love. But Kwaku's greatest gift was also his greatest sorrow, for he was utterly alone, no other bird in all of Ghana possessing a voice like his, and so he lived between worlds, too magical for ordinary birds, too mortal for the spirits who sometimes visited him in dreams. Then came the dry season that changed everything. For 7 moons no rain falling upon the land, the great river Pra shrinking to a whisper, and the red earth cracking like a broken calabash while crops withered in the fields, and the people of Nkosuo watched their children grow thin as reeds. The village elders tried everything. They poured libations to the ancestors, performed the ancient rain dances, and offered their finest kente cloth to Nyame. But the sky remained as hard and bright as brass, and each day brought new fears until old Nana Akosua, the village storyteller whose memory held 1,000 tales, finally spoke the truth that everyone feared to voice. "The sky god is angry," she whispered, her voice dry as rustling leaves. "Something has disturbed the balance between earth and heaven. The music of the world is dying, and without it, all life will fade like smoke." As if summoned by her words, a figure emerged from the shimmering heat of the afternoon, tall and dark as midnight, with 8 arms that moved like shadows and eyes that held the wisdom of 10,000 stories. For Anansi the trickster had come to Nkosuo. "Old woman speaks truth," Anansi said, his voice carrying the weight of ancient secrets. "But she knows only half the story. Listen well, for I will tell you what the spirits whisper in the realm between sleeping and waking." The villagers gathered around the great spider, children hiding behind their mothers' skirts, men gripping their walking sticks with nervous hands, for even the bravest warriors knew better than to show disrespect to one who had stolen stories from the gods themselves. And Anansi began to weave his tale, his 8 arms moving in hypnotic patterns as he spoke of how long ago, when the world was new, Nyame the sky god created all music and placed it in a great calabash guarded by his daughter, Akosua Serwa, the most beautiful spirit in all the heavens, whose voice was so pure that it could bring rain to the desert or make flowers bloom in winter. For she was the source of all songs, all rhythms, all the music that makes life worth living. But Akosua Serwa grew lonely in her golden palace above the clouds, looking down at the earth to see mortals dancing, singing, celebrating life with the music she had given them. And her heart ached with longing, so she asked her father to let her walk among humans for just 1 season, to experience the joy of music from the ground rather than the sky. Nyame refused, saying, "My daughter, if you leave your post, all music will fade from the world. The calabash requires your constant presence, your divine voice to keep the songs alive, for you are too precious to risk among mortals. But love, even divine love, will not be denied." And Akosua Serwa disguised herself as a mortal woman and descended to earth on moonbeams and morning mist, wandering the villages of Ghana for 30 days, listening to drums and flutes, joining in the harvest dances, learning what it meant to create music with hands that could feel pain and voices that could grow tired. It was in this village, beneath that very tree where Kwaku now made his nest, that she first heard the golden voice of the weaver bird, his song so beautiful, so pure, that it reminded her of her own divine nature. And in that moment, Akosua Serwa fell in love, not just with Kwaku's voice, but with his kind heart, his gentle spirit, and the way he used his gift to bring joy to others. For 7 nights, she met him in secret, and they would sing together, goddess and bird, immortal and mortal, creating harmonies that made the stars dance in their courses. But on the 8th night, Niame discovered his daughter's absence, the calabash of music beginning to crack without her presence, and songs fading from the world. In his rage, Niame cursed his daughter to remain on earth forever, transformed into a mortal woman who would age and die like any human. But worse than this punishment was what he did to the music itself. He sealed the calabash with bonds of starfire and decreed that no more new songs would ever be born. Only the music that already existed could remain, and even that would slowly fade until the world fell silent forever. Akosua Serwa tried desperately to reach her divine form again, to restore the calabash and save the world's music. But the curse was too strong, and she aged rapidly, her immortal beauty fading like flowers in the sun, until with her last breath, she made Kwaku a promise. My voice lives on in yours, beloved. You alone carry the power to restore the music of the world. But the price will be everything you hold dear. Anansi's voice faded to a whisper, and the villagers sat in stunned silence, even the crickets seeming to have stopped their chirping, until Nana Akosua whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, the woman who died here last season, the stranger who came to us singing songs we had never heard. That was Akosua Serwa. And Anansi nodded solemnly, explaining that now, as the last of the old music fades, the drought grows worse. For without new songs to please the spirits, without the rhythm that keeps the world in balance, all life will perish. And only Kwaku can break his beloved's curse. But he must be willing to sacrifice his own gift to do it. All eyes turned to the weaver bird perched in the ancient tree. Kwaku, having listened to every word, his small heart breaking with each revelation. For the woman he had loved and mourned was the daughter of the sky god himself, and she had died trying to save the music of the world. So when he spoke, his voice was steady despite his grief. Tell me what I must do. Anansi's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect as he explained, you must sing the Song of Unmaking, little brother. It is the only melody powerful enough to break the starfire bonds around the calabash of music. But this song can only be sung once, and whoever sings it will lose their voice forever. Not just the ability to make music, but the ability to make any sound at all. And you will live in eternal silence. The villagers gasped, for to ask Kwaku to give up his voice was like asking the sun to give up its light, the river to give up its flow. But Anansi continued relentlessly. There is more. The Song of Unmaking must be sung at the moment when Niame himself appears on earth, during the eclipse that comes with tomorrow's dawn, and you will have only moments to complete the song before the sky god's wrath destroys everything in its path. For if you fail, if your voice breaks or you hesitate for even an instant, the world will end in silence and darkness. Kwaku felt the weight of impossibility settle on his small shoulders, knowing that to sing the Song of Unmaking would mean never again hearing his own voice echo through the forest, never again comforting the children with lullabies, never again feeling the golden warmth in his throat when music flowed through him. It would mean a lifetime of silence for a bird whose very soul was song. But as he looked down at the faces of the villagers, the children he had sung to sleep, the elders whose grief he had eased, the young lovers whose courtships he had serenaded, he knew there was no choice at all, and he said simply, "Teach me the song." What followed was the strangest night in the history of Nkosuo, as Anansi, who was known for his tricks and schemes, became a patient teacher, weaving the Song of Unmaking from the silk of his webs, creating patterns in the air that only Kwaku could see and follow. For the song was unlike anything Kwaku had ever learned. It had no words, only pure melody, but such a melody that spiraled upward like smoke, then plunged deep as roots into the earth, holding within it the sound of every instrument ever crafted, every voice that had ever raised in song, every rhythm that had ever moved a human heart. Learning it was agony, each note feeling like swallowing fire, each phrase like lifting a mountain, for the song of unmaking was not meant for mortal throats. And Kwaku felt his voice beginning to fray at the edges as he practiced until Anansi commanded him to stop, when he began to cough up drops of golden blood, saying, "Save what strength remains. You will need every note intact for tomorrow." As dawn approached, bringing with it the eclipse that would herald Nyame's arrival, Kwaku perched on the highest branch of his tree and looked out over the land he loved. The red earth stretching endlessly toward the horizon, dotted with the sleeping forms of the village, and somewhere among those humble houses, the spirit of Akosua Serwa still lingered, waiting for redemption. The eclipse began slowly, the moon sliding across the face of the sun like a dark eye closing, and as the light faded, an unnatural chill settled over the land, and the very air seemed to hold its breath until Nyame came, the sky god descending not in glory, but in wrath, his form towering above the clouds, his eyes blazing like twin suns, his voice thunder that made the earth tremble as he roared, "Who dares to wake me with songs of power? Who seeks to undo the justice I have wrought?" This was the moment, and as the eclipse reached its peak and darkness fell like a curtain across the world, Kwaku opened his throat and began to sing the song of unmaking, the first notes ringing out clear and strong, cutting through Nyame's thunder like a knife through silk, the sky god's eyes widening in shock as he recognized the forbidden melody, the one song that could undo his carefully woven curse. "Silence!" Nyame commanded, his voice containing the power to stop rivers and topple mountains. But Kwaku did not stop, and even as his voice began to crack and burn, even as golden tears streamed from his eyes, he continued to sing, the song of unmaking pouring from him like his very life force, each note a prayer, each phrase a sacrifice. Around him, the world began to change, the starfire bonds holding the great calabash of music starting to weaken, sending ripples of melody across the sky, while in the village below, instruments that had fallen silent began to hum with remembered tunes, and children stirred in their sleep, humming lullabies they had never heard before. "You little fool," Nyame whispered, and for the first time, his voice held not anger but awe. "Do you not understand what you are giving up?" But Kwaku could no longer speak. The song of unmaking was consuming his voice like fire consuming dried grass, though his eyes, bright with determination and love, gave the sky god his answer. Yes, he understood, and yes, he was willing to pay the price. As Kwaku's voice reached the climax of the song of unmaking, something miraculous happened, for the spirit of Akosua Serwa appeared beside him, her form shimmering like moonlight on water, her own voice joining his, adding harmonies that no mortal throat could produce, and together, goddess and bird, immortal and mortal, they sang the final notes of the song of unmaking until the starfire bonds around the calabash of music shattered like glass, releasing 10,000 years of stored melodies into the world. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Rain began to fall, not ordinary rain, but drops that chimed like bells as they struck the earth. The rivers sang as they swelled, the wind carried symphonies through the trees, and every living thing found its voice renewed and strengthened, while in the village of Nkosuo, drums began to beat without drummers, flutes played melodies that made flowers bloom, and the people woke to find their hearts full of songs they had never known but somehow remembered.